I walked into my courtroom, and the air was already thick with that specific brand of arrogance you can smell a mile away. It's a cocktail of cheap cologne and unearned authority. On the defendant's side stood a man in a suit that was trying too hard. He was Warden Arthur Finch. He stood ramrod straight, a smirk plastered on his face as if he were here to receive an award, not to answer for his actions. He thought his title was a shield. I've been doing this for a long time. I know a title is just a bigger target. On the other side, the plaintiff, a young man named Leo. He looked like a scared rabbit, fresh out of the system and now facing the man who ran it. He was twisting his hands, his eyes darting everywhere but at the warden. A classic power imbalance. David and Goliath, only Goliath was wearing a better tailored suit and probably lying through his teeth. I sat down. The silence in my courtroom is a living thing. I command it. I looked at the papers in front of me. A small claims case, a few $100s for personal property allegedly stolen or misplaced, as the official jargon would call it inside Finch's institution. I already knew this wasn't about the money. It never is. It's about dignity. I looked up, my eyes locking onto the warden. Mr. Finch, I began, my voice flat, cutting through the silence. You are the warden at Northgate Correctional Facility? He puffed out his chest. That's Warden Finch, Your Honor. And yes, for 12 years, the smirk didn't waver. He was correcting me in my courtroom before I'd even finished my first sentence. Oh, this was going to be a delight. Internally, I smiled. It's always the ones who think they're the smartest in the room who make the most spectacular fools of themselves. All right, Warden, I said, putting just enough emphasis on the title to let him know I was indulging him for now. The plaintiff here, Leo Keller, alleges that upon his release, personal items logged into your facility's property room were not returned to him. Specifically, a watch and $217 in cash. Is that correct, Mr. Keller? Leo jumped, startled to be addressed. Yes, ma'am. Your Honor, yes. I turned back to Finch. So, Warden, a simple question. What happened to his property? Here it comes. The dance. The verbal gymnastics they all try to perform. Finch cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, with all due respect, you have to understand the environment I operate. We process thousands of inmates. Property is handled according to strict protocol. Sometimes things get lost in the shuffle. It's an unfortunate but unavoidable part of the system. He delivered the line with the practiced ease of a politician explaining away a scandal. He was talking down to me, trying to educate me on his big, important world. I leaned forward. Lost in the shuffle? Is that what you call it? Let me tell you what I call it. I call it theft. When you take something that doesn't belong to you, it's called stealing. It doesn't matter if you do it in a back alley or in a government building while wearing a shiny badge. The concept is not complicated. A 5-year-old understands it. The smirk on his face tightened just a fraction, a crack in the facade. That's a rather simplistic view, Your Honor. I find simple works best. It gets to the truth faster, I shot back. You brought the property log from Mr. Keller's intake, as requested by the court? He nodded, sliding a thin file across the podium. Of course, as you can see, the watch is logged, the cash is not. He said it with an air of finality. Checkmate. I picked up the file. I didn't even have to look at it yet. I looked at him. So your position is that this young man, who had no access to his money, is lying? That he's making up a story about $217 just for fun? Finch actually chuckled, a short, condescending little bark of a laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has never been held accountable for anything. Your Honor, he said, shaking his head slightly, as if pitying my naivete. You don't know these people like I do. They'll say anything. They come out with nothing, and they'll try to get anything they can. It's a game to them. That was it. The moment he crossed the line, he wasn't just defending his position. He was mocking the very idea of justice for someone like Leo. He was mocking me for even entertaining it. I put the file down, folded my hands, and stared at him. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. My bailiff, Bird, straightened up. He knows the signs. A game? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. You think this is a game? You think my courtroom is a place for you to stand there and deliver character assassinations instead of facts? I picked up the file again, opening it. You say the cash isn't logged, but I see here on the intake form item line 4, it says personal effects pouch, contents to be verified. There's a signature next to it. Is that your signature, Warden? His eyes flickered to the paper, then back to me. The smirk was gone, completely. It's a standard procedure. The contents are verified later. And where is that verification form? I asked. The one that says the pouch was empty? The one that an officer signs and the inmate signs to confirm the contents? Where is that piece of paper, Warden Finch? Because if you're running a facility with strict protocols, I'm certain you wouldn't miss a step. As simple as that. He stood there, silent. His mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing. He thought he could walk in here, flash his title, and I'd just roll over. He didn't bring the one document that would either prove his case or hang him. And his face told me exactly why he didn't bring it. It didn't exist. I leaned back in my chair. Let me explain something to you, Warden. You're not in your prison anymore. You're in my world now. And in my world, we don't operate on condescension and vague references to the system. We operate on evidence. And right now, the only thing you're providing me with is a very strong sense that you are a liar and a thief. The silence stretched. It was beautiful. It was the sound of a bully's brain scrambling for an escape route where there was none. Finch's face, which had started as a mask of smug superiority, was now turning a blotchy red. He was cornered, and he knew it. But men like him don't surrender. They double down on the stupid. Your Honor, he finally managed, his voice now strained. This is a baseless accusation. This man is a convicted felon. His word against mine? It's preposterous. I leaned forward, my elbows on the bench. Listen to me very carefully, Mr. Finch. I don't care if he's a convicted felon or a choir boy. He is a litigant in my courtroom, and you will afford him the same respect you'd afford anyone else. His past has been adjudicated. That's over. Today, we're talking about your behavior, your shoddy record keeping, your inability to answer a simple question. So let's not talk about him. Let's talk about you. I let that sink in. I was taking his weapon, Leo's past, and turning it on him. Let's move on, I said, my tone brisk. Let's forget the $217 for a moment. Your own log, the one you so proudly provided, states you took possession of a Seiko silver-toned men's watch. Where is it? He seemed relieved to change the subject, thinking this was safer ground. The watch was placed in his property bag upon release, as per protocol. Is that so? I looked over at Leo. Mr. Keller, when you were released, were you given a property bag? Leo nodded, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. And what was in it? A pair of old sneakers, a t-shirt, and some legal papers. That's it. I turned my gaze back to the warden. A predator's gaze. So we have a discrepancy. He says the watch wasn't there. You say it was. Luckily for us, your facility has strict protocols. So show me the release form. The one Mr. Keller would have signed acknowledging receipt of all his logged property, including the silver-toned Seiko watch. Where is that signature? Finch's Adam's apple bobbed. He shuffled his papers, a nervous, pointless gesture. He was buying time, but the bank was closed. There seems to have been an administrative oversight, he mumbled. The release officer must have neglected to get the signature. I laughed. Not a warm laugh. It was a sharp, brittle sound that echoed in the courtroom. An administrative oversight? A neglectful officer? You have an excuse for everything, don't you? It's like a magical bag of pathetic justifications. First, it was the system. Then it was the plaintiff's character. Now it's a phantom officer who made a mistake. Do you see a pattern here, Warden? The one person who is never responsible for anything that happens in your facility is you. I stood up. I like to stand sometimes. It changes the energy. It reminds them who is in charge. I'm going to tell you what I think happened, and you are going to stand there and listen, I said, pointing a finger at him. He flinched. I think you run a sloppy, corrupt ship. I think you and your staff see these inmates as less than human. They're just numbers. And their property is a little bonus, a slush fund, a watch here, a few dollars there. Who are they going to complain to? You. And if they do, you give them the runaround, just like you tried to give me. You talk about protocols and procedures, but it's all a smokescreen to cover up petty, pathetic thievery. That is an outrageous allegation. Finch blustered, his voice rising. Don't interrupt me, I thundered. He physically recoiled. The room was dead silent again. Bart didn't even blink. You're right. It's an allegation. So prove me wrong. You have all the resources of the state behind you. You have files and computers and officers, and you walk into my courtroom with a single, incomplete piece of paper and a whole lot of hot air. You came in here to mock this man, and by extension, to mock this court. You thought you were going to make a fool out of him? But the only fool I see here today, Warden, is you. I sat back down. I picked up my pen. Now, let's talk about this neglectful officer. What's his name? I want his name. I want to know if he's been disciplined for this oversight. I want to see the report you filed when you realized a prisoner's property you were legally responsible for, went missing. I want a paper trail, because a man who runs his facility by the book, a man with strict protocols, would have a mountain of paperwork about an incident like this. So where is it? He was sweating now, not a little glisten, but visible beads of sweat on his forehead. The suit wasn't looking so sharp anymore. It looked like a cage, and he was the one trapped inside. His smirk was a distant memory. All that was left was the raw, ugly face of a man whose power had just been publicly stripped away, and I was just getting started. The warden stood there, mute. His mouth was a thin, white line. He had no answers. He had no paperwork. He had no phantom officer's name. He had come armed with arrogance and nothing else. And in my courtroom, arrogance is not a defense. It's an admission of guilt. I stared at him, letting the silence do its work. It's a powerful tool. People rush to fill a void, and when they're lying, they fill it with more lies, more tangled threads for me to pull. You have nothing, do you? I said, my voice calm again. It's the calm that should scare them the most. You have no reports, no disciplinary actions, no signed forms. You have nothing because none of it ever happened. There was no administrative oversight. There was just a theft. I swiveled my chair slightly to face Leo. The young man was watching this exchange like a tennis match, his head whipping back and forth. But now, for the first time, the fear in his eyes was being replaced by something else. A flicker of hope. He was seeing Goliath stumble. Mr. Keller, I said gently, tell me about the watch. Where did you get it? He swallowed hard. It was my father's, Your Honor. He gave it to me before he passed away. It's not a fancy watch. It's just a Seiko. But it's all I had left of him. And there it was, the heart of the matter. It was never about $100 watch. It was about a memory, a connection, the last tangible piece of his father. And this man, this warden, in his cheap suit and his puffed up ego, had either stolen it or allowed it to be stolen, and then had the gall to stand here and call this young man a liar for wanting it back. The callousness was breathtaking. I turned back to Finch. The blotchy red on his face was now a deep, angry crimson. Humiliation was a new experience for him. You hear that, Warden? I asked, my voice dripping with ice. That's what you took. Not just a piece of metal and glass. You took the man's last memory of his dead father. And you dismissed it as lost in the shuffle. You stand there in your position of power, a public servant paid by the taxpayers, people like me, people like Mr. Keller's father, and you preside over a system that robs a man not just of his freedom, but of his dignity. And then you have the audacity to come in here and laugh about it. I did not laugh, he spat out, the desperation making him stupid. Oh, believe me, you laughed. I countered immediately. It was a smug little bark right after you called Mr. Keller and people like him liars and cheats. Bird, did you hear the warden laugh? Bird, stoic as ever, simply looked at Finch and gave a slow, deliberate nod. I did, Judge. The warden looked like he'd been slapped, betrayed by the neutral officer of the court. He didn't understand. Bart isn't on my side or his side. Bart is on the side of the truth. And the truth in this room was suffocating Warden Finch. So here's what's going to happen, I said, my tone shifting to one of finality. I was done with the questions. Now came the judgment. The plaintiff is asking for the value of the watch, which he estimates at $150 and the $217 in cash. That's a total of $367. A pittance, a rounding error in your facility's budget. But we're not just talking about the money, are we? We're talking about accountability. I picked up my gavel. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $367, I declared, the sound of the wood cracking against the block. But we're not finished. You are not paying this out of the prison's miscellaneous funds. You, Arthur Finch, are paying this out of your own pocket. His jaw dropped. What? You can't do that. This was an institutional matter. You made it a personal matter when you decided to come in here and lie to my face, I retorted, my voice rising to match his. You made it personal when you maligned the character of the plaintiff instead of producing the evidence I requested. You are the head of the institution. The buck stops with you. So you will personally write a check to Mr. Keller. Today, I wasn't done. The judgment was just the start. The real sentence was the exposure. Furthermore, I continued, looking past him to the camera, to the audience, to the world outside my courtroom, I am ordering a transcript of this entire proceeding to be sent to the State Department of Corrections, the Attorney General's office, and the Governor's office. I'm going to attach a personal note suggesting they conduct a full top-to-bottom audit of your facility's property management protocols. I have a feeling that Mr. Keller's watch is just the tip of a very dirty, very corrupt iceberg. And you, Warden, put the spotlight on it yourself. The color drained from his face. He was no longer just a man who lost a small claims case. He was a man whose career was circling the drain, all because he couldn't stomach the idea of treating a former inmate with basic human respect. He had mocked me. He had mocked the system he was supposed to represent. And now the system was about to turn on him. He finally understood. He wasn't in his little kingdom anymore. He was in mine. And in my kingdom, justice always, always gets the last word. He stood there, utterly defeated. The arrogance had been sandblasted off him, leaving behind the pathetic, crumbling foundation of a petty tyrant. His mouth opened and closed a few times, like a fish gasping for air. He was searching for a protest, an objection, and another lie, but he had exhausted his supply. All that was left was the raw, humiliating truth of his own incompetence and corruption. I looked at him one last time. You thought your title made you untouchable, I said, my voice low and steady. Let me give you a piece of free advice, Mr. Finch. A title doesn't make you powerful. Your character does. And from where I'm sitting, your character is bankrupt. I gestured to Bird. Bird, please escort Mr. Finch to the plaintiff's podium so he can write that check. And make sure the memo line reads, for theft and arrogance. I want him to remember this every time he balances his checkbook. A few stifled snickers rippled through the gallery. Finch shot a venomous glare at the sound, but his power was gone. He was just a man in a suit who had been publicly dismantled. Bird stepped forward, his presence alone a silent command. Finch, with the stiff, jerky movements of a marionette whose strings had been cut, walked over to the plaintiff's side. He fumbled for his checkbook, his hands shaking with rage. I turned my attention back to Leo. The young man was crying, not sobbing, but silent tears were streaming down his face. They weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of vindication. For the first time, probably in a very long time, someone had fought for him. Someone had believed him. Mr. Keller, I said softly. He looked up, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. You conducted yourself with dignity today. You told the truth, and you stood your ground against a bully. I can't give you your father's watch back, and I am truly sorry for that. But I can give you this, the knowledge that you were heard, and that you were right. He nodded, unable to speak, and whispered a quiet, "Thank you, Your Honor." It was more than enough. While Finch was scratching out the check under Bird's watchful eye, I organized my papers. This case was over, but its impact wasn't. The real work was just beginning, far outside my courtroom walls. The letters I would send would trigger an avalanche. Finch thought he was swatting a fly. Instead, he had brought the whole mountain down on himself. That's the thing about bullies. They're so focused on the small person in front of them that they never see the bigger picture until it's too late. Finch tore the check out and practically threw it on the podium in front of Leo. He turned to leave his face a thunderous mask. "Not so fast, Warden," I called out. He froze his back to me. "You're not done here. You will stand there and you will watch Mr. Keller accept your payment. And then you will apologize to him." He whipped around. "Apologize? I will not." "Oh, you will," I said, my voice hardening again. "You will apologize for the loss of his property under your supervision, and you will apologize for your despicable behavior in my courtroom today. You will do it, or I will hold you in contempt of court right now. You can spend the night in a holding cell and think about whether your pride is worth more than your freedom. The choice is yours." We locked eyes across the courtroom. It was the final test of wills. His entire being was screaming in defiance, but he saw the absolute certainty in my face. I was not bluffing. I never bluff. The fight went out of him. He deflated, the last bit of air escaping from his overinflated ego. He turned his head towards Leo, his eyes refusing to make contact. "I apologize for the situation," he mumbled, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "That wasn't an apology. That was an insult," I snapped. "Look him in the eye and do it again. Properly." Slowly, painfully, Finch lifted his gaze and met Leo's. For a moment, there was just silence. The powerful man and the powerless man, finally on equal footing. "I am sorry," Finch said, the words choked but clear, "for losing your property and for my conduct." It was the most he was capable of, and we all knew it. Leo just nodded, accepting the check from Bird. He held it in his hand, a small piece of paper that represented so much more than $367. It was proof. It was justice. "Now you may go," I said to Finch, dismissing him with a wave of my hand. He turned and walked out of my courtroom, not with the confident stride he had entered with, but with the hunched shoulders of a man who had lost everything. He hadn't just lost a case. He had lost his authority, his reputation, and I suspect his job was next on the chopping block. After he was gone, I looked at Leo. "You're a good man, Mr. Keller. Don't let people like him tell you otherwise. Go and do something good with your life. Make your father proud." He smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up his face. "I will, Your Honor. Thank you." He walked out, clutching his check, his head held high. That right there is why I do this job. It's not about the money. It's not about the drama. It's about those moments. It's about taking a system that is so often tilted in favor of the powerful and, for a brief, shining moment, making it fair. It's about reminding every bully who walks through my door that titles and suits don't mean a thing in the face of the simple, unvarnished truth. And as I always say, if you tell the truth, you don't have to have a good memory. Warden Finch is about to learn that lesson the hard way. And me, I have another case to hear.